Hi, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Shades of Sage, where I discuss all things motherhood. My name is Tashima, and today I'm going to go over how to know if you are a good candidate for VBAC. So in my last video, I talked about VBAC tips, ways to prepare for a VBAC birth. So if you haven't seen that video, I will link it down below. Today I'm just going to list some things that most doctors look for if you are planning or if you are considering having a VBAC birth. So let's get started. First good indicator that you would be successful in having a vaginal birth after cesarean is if you have had a vaginal birth before. So if in a previous pregnancy you were able to deliver vaginally, that is a good indicator that you would possibly do well and do successful with having a VBAC birth. Because if you have had a vaginal birth in the past, you have what they call a proven pelvis. That means that there's no issues as far as you being able to push your baby out. You just had to have a C-section previously for whatever reason, but it's highly likely that you will be able to have another vaginal birth after your cesarean. Another good indicator that you would be successful in having a vaginal birth is if you are 35 or younger. Studies show that those women that attempt to have a vaginal birth after cesarean under the ages of 35 are more successful at having a vaginal birth after cesarean. One of the reasons why is it's a little less risky for you to deliver in general. So usually women 35 and under have a higher success rate at having a VBAC birth. So another good indicator that you are good to go with attempting a VBAC birth is the type of incision that you have. And it's important to note that the incision that you have on the outside, so the part that you see on your skin, may not actually be the same type of incision that you have on your uterus. So if you have a low transverse incision, that is a good indicator that you can attempt a VBAC. If you have a classical incision, which is where they cut lengthwise instead of horizontally, most doctors will not deliver a vaginal birth if you have that kind of incision, or they won't even let you attempt to have a VBAC birth. So again, it's important to note that the incision that you see on your skin may not be the same type of incision that's on your uterus. So in this case, you definitely want to make sure that you have your medical records handy so that you have that information, because if you do have a classical cut on your uterus but on the outside you have a transverse cut, they still probably will not allow you to attempt a VBAC birth. But all that to say that if you have a low transverse incision on your uterus, you're all good to go in attempting to have a VBAC birth. So the next good indicator of a VBAC birth is the reason why you had to have a cesarean your previous pregnancy. So maybe you had a cesarean because your baby was breached. In that case, you are a good candidate for a VBAC birth. Maybe you had a C-section because of the fetal heart tones, or you had to have a C-section because something was going on with the baby's heartbeat or the baby's behavior, or if your baby was in fetal distress, then you also are a good candidate for a VBAC birth as well. But say you had to have a C-section because you have placenta accreta or placenta previa, or because you failed to progress. The same thing might happen in this pregnancy as well. So the reason for your previous C-section will also help you to know if you're a good candidate for a VBAC birth or not. And the last point that I want to mention is if you've had 2 or less C-sections, you are a good candidate for a VBAC birth. So if you've had 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 C-sections, most doctors will not agree to a VBAC birth for you. So it really depends on how many C-sections you've had. If you had 2 or less, you are a good candidate for a VBAC birth. Those are some guidelines for if you are a good candidate for a VBAC birth. You don't have to meet each and every one. Maybe 1 only applies to you, or maybe 2 or 3. But if any of these apply to you, then you are a good candidate for attempting to have a VBAC. So most OBGYNs, if you are attempting a VBAC, you're probably considered a high-risk pregnancy, and they do have some requirements. So I just want to list those real quickly so you're not blindsided whenever you do go to talk to your doctor about a VBAC birth if you haven't already. And one of them is that they want you, or they're really looking for you to be 18 months between pregnancies. So from the time that you delivered your last child until the time that you get pregnant, they want to see a 18-month period in between those 2 times. So another requirement that a lot of OBs have for women that are attempting a VBAC is that you go into labor naturally by yourself. And the reason for that is because women that are attempting to VBAC have a compromised uterus, and they want to do whatever they can to keep the uterus from rupturing. So most times, most doctors are not really comfortable with inducing labor and using traditional forms to induce labor that they would on a woman who has never had a C-section before. And then the last requirement that most doctors will say is that they want you to go into labor on your due date or before. If you are attempting a VBAC birth, most times they will schedule you for a C-section on your due date. That's pretty much standard if you are working with an OB. Like I said, these are just some guidelines that most doctors follow if you are attempting a VBAC birth. birth, or if you're thinking about it, maybe you had a cesarean and you're not pregnant yet and you're kind of playing around in your mind which way you would like to deliver for your next baby. But I don't want to make this video to scare you or to put you off from having a VBAC birth if these things don't apply to you. A lot of these things did not apply to me at all, and I had 2 VBAC births. The length of my pregnancies did not apply to me. The length of my pregnancies from my first to my second was 11 months, and from my second to my third was 5 months. I've never had a vaginal birth before attempting my first VBAC birth, and I went into labor on my own for 1 VBAC birth, but for the second I didn't. So just know that it can be done even if all of these things that I mentioned don't apply to you. Remember, these are just stats. These are just generalizations. Everybody's body is different. And at the end of the day, remember that it's your choice. Nobody can force you into anything. So I just want to make sure that women know that, and that they're empowered with their bodies. And if you want to attempt a VBAC birth, I say go for it, and just make sure that you're armed with all the information. 70 to 80% of women that attempt a VBAC birth are successful. So the chances are high and likely if you even just decide to do it. So hopefully this video is encouraging for anyone out there who is attempting a VBAC or who is looking for VBAC information. So that's all that I have for today. If you have any video suggestions or any more information about VBACs or birthing in general that you would like to see on this channel, leave a comment down below. If you like this video, give me a great big thumbs up. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you so much for watching today, and I'll see you in my next video. And remember to let your story be your power. Bye.